Welcome. Today we're here on the Real Conversations with Real Moms, and I'm here with my dear, dear, dear friend Jessica. And I just want to tell about what this series is. The premise of the series is that every mom has a superpower. I believe that all moms have strengths, and rather than competing with one another, we can celebrate our strengths, learn from one another, and grow together. So we're having real conversations with real moms. And Jessica is one of my longest standing friendships. I like to say that instead of oldest. It makes it sound well, she's one of my longest standing friendships. We've been prayer partners together, even though we live in different states. We prayed our children up together, literally from when our boys were very little all the way until today. We still pray for each other's children, but we used to pray daily by phone and for years and years. And anyway, Jessica, I believe Jessica's superpower, in my opinion, is her encouraging heart and her positive outlook despite when we go through difficulties. So today we're going to talk about when parenting doesn't go as planned, which honestly is every day, but there are deeper ways that parenting doesn't go as planned, and how do we navigate the seasons when parenting doesn't go as planned? So, or moments. So I'm going to talk to Jess, and she's going to tell us about her motherhood. So Jessica, tell us a bit about your family and your motherhood.
Okay, thanks, Ken. Motherhood, my idea about motherhood has evolved so much from when I first started. So I am mom to Evan, my only beloved son. I always thought I would be mom to a whole brood. That was not what happened, but I do have Evan, my 22-year-old son, but I also homeschooled my brother, who is closer in age to my son than he is to me. I have a brother, Michael, who is 26 now, and he is autistic, and I homeschooled him through college. I actually got to tutor him while he was in the college program. So there's Evan and Michael, and now I have a daughter-in-love, Kylie. I call her Kylie Boviley, and she is the mother to my grandchild, Leilani, who is 2.5, almost 2.5.
Oh my goodness.
And I also get to parent some younger women that I disciple, and I'm really, really grateful for that. And I do think of them kind of as part of my brood.
Yes, they are your brood. God expands our brood, doesn't he? It's so good, because I always thought I was going to have 4 kids, and I had 2, so I told them they were twice as good as the average child since they each represented 2 children. But God does expand our families to include so many other people over time. So, tell me what you think your mothering strengths are. I know what I think your mothering strengths are, but what do you think your mothering strengths are?
This is my superpower. I do think that I am optimistic, and I think that is really a gift from God, and it is sometimes used not for good, but mostly it's a superpower that's used for good when it's surrendered to God. So when it's based on truth and my hope being in the Lord, which is the reason, that's our hope, and it's a reason to be optimistic. And I think when we are searching for truth, we can see the good in every situation. And so the world calls that optimism. So I guess that's my superpower. I also think that I have an ability to put myself in my children's shoes. Well, in other people's shoes in general. I think that's why I love working with special needs kids. I see this special needs in myself. So I can almost always identify with someone else if I take some time to quiet down and put myself in their situation instead of thinking about how they affect me.
I think when you just said that, it reminded me of when God says that we have a hope that does not disappoint. And that word for hope in the Greek actually means assurance. And so it's like we have not just hope that's like hopeful, like, oh, I hope that happens, or, like a wishful thinking, which can be from the flesh. When we hope in the flesh, it's very wishful thinking. But when we hope in the Lord, we have a confidence because it's a promise that there are good things that are coming out of everything that's not good. And I think that's the thing you're talking about, is that you have that kind of confidence that comes from the certainty you have in Him, the promises you have in Him.
Yeah, I definitely have that defect of hope in the flesh too, though. I can put on a Pollyanna when I need to for a defense mechanism that takes me away from the Lord. So
I think that's true. All of our strengths that we have in our personalities also become our weaknesses in the flesh. So God made them for good. Then they got tainted by sin, and then he redeems them for his good again. But the flesh still is there where we can lean into something that's not as healthy on the other side. So, okay. So tell me about ways that your motherhood has not gone according to plan.
Okay, but I just want to tell you, this is really hard for me because I want to interview you too.
Well, you can ask me questions, but I want to hear about you, and then you can ask me some questions too.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, I know some answers, but I want everyone to know them.
Right.
Okay, so repeat your question. Sorry.
So, how has your motherhood not gone according to plan?
How has my mother? Okay, so got an hour? No. Well, from the beginning, I wanted to have many children, and I only have 7 on Earth. I had 3 miscarriages and 1 ectopic pregnancy, so we were not able to have more children. So that certainly was not part of my plan. And then my son was diagnosed with ADD, and that was not part of my plan. I really was part of the school of thought that boys will be boys, and ADD is just part of this grand conspiracy to over-medicate our children, and it's not real. And I will tell you now, I do believe it's real. And after my son was diagnosed, my husband was diagnosed with ADD. So I realized that it was part of my normal because that's how our house, runs. Probably I have ADD too. I know now, but I didn't know that then. It looks a lot different than our girls and boys. But that was definitely not part of my plan, and I kept trying to excuse it away.
Yeah.
And then for a while to discipline it away. To if I could just get him to sit still, if I could just find the right curriculum, and we homeschooled, and that was part of our journey. And the other thing, parenting didn't go as planned. I used to listen to Focus on the Family, this Christian radio show, about raising a family. According to God's plan, a lot of times the shows are about. And I would listen to that, really 5 days a week if I could on Christian radio, and tried to model my idea about parenting around all of these wonderful success stories that I heard on Focus on the Family. And I can tell you that every time we tried to have a family night, it did not go as planned. So that was sort of like God was giving me a look into the future of me surrendering my ideas so that I could instead do God's will. Instead, what I was trying to do is frame my ideas with God's will. So I really wanted to be in charge, and I really wanted to frame what I wanted to go on with God's word and something that I heard on Focus on the Family, and it never worked out. So it never really has gone according to plan. But in recent years, even more dramatically, my son Evan is a prodigal, and he's currently chasing hard after the world in many ways. And pretty much every fear that you could sort of generalize about your children has happened for us in our parents. So there are some specific fears that haven't come to pass yet, thankfully. But, my son was a teenage parent, unmarried. I mentioned my granddaughter. We had to ask him to leave our home because we couldn't follow our rules. And I'm not going to go into his story because it's really his story to tell. I don't want to go into details, but just we have a son who's a prodigal, and it's heartbreaking.
Yes,
it's hard to live through.
It is. As you talk about that, because we've had struggles with our teen son, which I also won't go into, because I love that you and I are both committed to not throwing our children under the bus, because they're not our enemies. We have a common enemy, and they are not it. But we have been through some hard times, as they've been through hard times, as they're trying to find their way, and then they lose their way, and they find their way back. And through that experience, God has taught you and I so much about leaning on Him, about trust, about how to maintain relationships. See, God maintains relationship with us when we wander. He's a God that pursues us. He's a God that doesn't leave us or forsake us. And so we've learned that kind of love through our children wandering and us not leaving or forsaking them, and learning through God how he teaches us to stay faithful to children who are finding their way or losing their way, depending on the day. And that has been one of the greatest lessons of my life, is to learn how to love someone when they're not at their best. And how to stay steady with lines. Like, God has lines in his love. And for us to have lines in our love, but to not have those set in fear or anger, but to be able to set them in a healthy way and still maintain a loving connection as much as is possible, because sometimes it's not as possible as we'd like it to be.
It depends upon us.
Right. As far as it depends upon us. Exactly. Absolutely. So I love that, because I think I've watched it in you a lot, and I've seen it in my own life. And it's awesome to see what God does to us and through us as we lean on him through hard seasons like that. So yeah, love that. Thank you for sharing about that. Because I think, and I do believe, like as you said, their story is theirs, but we have a part in it that we need to tell without harming them as we tell it. So yeah.
I feel like I just need to give a disclaimer. I did talk to my son before I talked to you,
Yes.
get his permission to talk about him.
Right.
And he said, whatever you want to say, Mom, it's fine. I'm an open book. But I want to be respectful of the idea that just because something is okay with him now doesn't mean a few years from now he'll be glad that I shared it.
Right. Like, I wrote the book, Parenting Your Teen Through Chaos and Crisis. Obviously, we had a teen who we've parented through some chaos and crisis. Most teens could fit in that category one day or the other. So even if your teen isn't off the rails, you're going to have some chaos and crisis while you're going through teen years with your child. But at one point, he got upset. He read the book and approved it. But later, he got upset about it. And I told him on the day he was upset, I will pull that off Amazon today. If it's something that you don't want out there, it was out there. But if you want it removed, I'll remove it. I would rather have him honored than have a book out there that's helping. God will help those parents through somebody else's book. I need to honor my child first. So I agree with you 100%. So, through these unplanned times, how has God changed you through the motherhood experiences that you've gone through, where things weren't planned and you had to adapt?
So much rich goodness. I was just reflecting before we talked today about all of the ways that God has just so deeply and richly blessed me and our family and so many people I know through seasons of hardness. Mm-hmm. And one of the things is that I have really been able to see how God has prepared us ahead of time. And one of the things you mentioned earlier was our time of prayer when our boys were little. And I can look back now with so much thanksgiving for that time. Yeah. And in the beginning of this hard season, it was a source of frustration. How could we have prayed all of these prayers and been so committed, and it looks like none of them have been answered?
Like they were wasted prayers.
Yes. No. And the Lord has showed me over and over that I can rest in that this is no surprise to him. Mm-hmm. This season is not, he's not taken aback by anything that we're going through. He knew when we were praying those prayers where our sons would be right now. Mm-hmm. And it's a comfort to me that we had that time in prayer. I do not look back and go, not that, of course, we could have prayed more, but it's not an area where I look back with regret or remorse and feel like I neglected anything as his mom in that arena as far as training for him goes. And I'm so thankful to God for that, and for you. I'm so thankful for you and for friends that can remind us. That's one of the blessings that's really been transformative for me, is to look at one of the blessings of having long-term friendships. I think this is so important for us as moms, is to have people who will speak truth into our life and remind us when we doubt the good things.
Yes.
That we have surely to look forward to because of what we've gone through and had good things on the other side of. And sometimes we forget that, but friends who have walked with us a long time in our journey can remind us of that. The biggest way that God has changed me in this, I feel like I say this over and over. I know I've told you this 100 times a week, is that the Lord has really helped the truth to penetrate in my very deepest self that fear is never as bad as I think it is. The thing that I'm afraid of is never as bad as I'm afraid that it will be. Because when I'm imagining my fear, and most of my biggest fears have been about mothering, in this season of my life, when I'm imagining the worst case scenario, and I'm sitting in that fear and letting it run through my head what the things that I'm afraid of, it's the worst that it will ever be right then. Because when the thing comes to pass that I'm afraid of, and they often do come to pass, our fears often come to pass, it's always better than I had imagined it would be, because God is always with me, and God is never in my fear. That is the way that fear is a liar. There's no God in the picture. But the truth is, there's no God-forsaken place. Even the season that we walk through, the very thing that we're afraid of in the darkest valley, He's there with us. And so even if I have to walk through the very thing that I'm so terrified of, I'm going to be okay, because God is there with me. He does not leave me or forsake me. His presence is near the brokenhearted, and He doesn't just redeem it when we get to the other side of the valley. When we're walking through the valley, there's a sweet communion with Him that we don't have in other seasons. Exactly. There's different kinds of sweetness in other seasons, but that closeness that I want to say I can smell Him, but I can't. I really want to smell Him. But when He's so close, you can feel His presence. It's almost like you can't sustain that kind of presence for all of your life, the day in, day out. But when we're walking through those fears, He's there. So the biggest truth for me has been Him teaching me this over and over and over.
I love that. I heard somebody say, I'd love to learn my best lessons shopping and eating ice cream. That's not exactly where we learn our deepest lessons, and even just where we are grown, and I think about going to the gym, and how when I go to the gym at first, I work with a trainer once a week just to get me there, and when I work with this trainer, he starts me out with like this much weight, and it's hard, and I'm working out. And then when I go back, he's got like this much weight, and then he's got more, and it just keeps increasing the weight, but I'm growing and I can manage it more. And I feel like that's the way the Lord uses trials in my life. Like each trial has strengthened me more, and not that He's adding it on. I don't want to get into theological stuff about that, but just that as we go through trials that we're allowed to go through, it's for our good. It's for our strengthening in Him and our dependence on Him and our ability to be more like Him. And I've seen Him strip away things that were unlike Him and build in things that are like Him through trials in other people. In you, I've seen Him do that in you, and in me, I've seen Him do it. And it's an amazing thing to watch the character that He develops. And we've talked about this over the summer, and when I was there in November visiting, that it's endurance that builds character. It's not escape. We pray for escape, but escape doesn't build our character. The scripture doesn't say through escape you build perseverance and you build character. It's through endurance that we persevere, and then we build character. And so we have to endure something, and that means we're going to hold up under it. But we're not holding ourselves up. His strength is made perfect in our weakness. So it's His strength in us that is built up through that. And
Patty, what you said about building endurance and the picture of the weightlifting. If there was another way that we could build muscle, we would. We wouldn't do the training.
Right.
And I believe the same is true with God. If there was another way that He could grow our character, He does not allow one more ounce of pain in our life than is necessary to grow us where we need to go for our good.
Exactly.
So if there was another way, it would happen. And so in some ways we can then thank Him, kind of resting in the knowledge of that.
That's right. Yeah. And it's just so awesome to see the true redemption of God. I can look back over my life, my own personal walk, and coming out of sin and of various kinds, and just seeing how He hasn't wasted a drop of anything that happened to me or anything I did to myself through my poor choice making, that He hasn't wasted one drop of that, and how He won't waste it in my child's life either, and I think somebody in our church just said recently, why do we think our children are going to go a different path than we did? Like we had to go a hard road to get to God sometimes. They're going to have their hard roads to get to God. And we want to spare them that, but we don't do them favors when we get in the mix and try to get ahead of it. Like, it'd be like a Mack truck coming. We're just going to put our hand up and stop it. Like, how is that going to happen? You know, we can't stop them, but we can come alongside God and them in the process of what's happening. And that's what we're called to do, is to come alongside. So,
and you know, we can tell our friends, Patty, like I can tell you, we have to die to self. We know that that's true, and we know that it's good. And I can even tell you that about your children. But for some reason, when it's our own children, it is so hard to surrender to God and to know that this is their path.
Yeah.
But we want him to be their God. We don't want them to have a relationship with our God. We want him to know him as their own.
Lately, and I tell you, my friend Amy had prayed this when we used to meet for prayer, and she would pray, whatever it takes to make Jordan yours, over my son. And I thought, how dare you pray that over my son? Like, like, I was mad at her, like, not really mad, but you're like, don't pray that over my son. Like, that's an awful prayer, because I knew how strong-willed he was, and that could take a lot. And I was like, oh my goodness. But now that's my prayer for him, whatever it takes for him to be yours, because I know the most awesome life possible, the most adventuresome, the most rich, the most fulfilling life is the life that God has when we're sold out for him, when we're all his. And so I want that. And I want whatever it takes for my son to be in that place where God is at the center, because anything else that we're chasing is idolatry. And as we go into idolatry, idols lie to us and we follow them, and they promise one thing and they deliver a little bit of it, but then they deliver so much pain and loss and heartache and disappointment. And so I want my son torn away from idols and following God wholeheartedly. And whatever it does take has become my prayer. Whatever it takes.
And at the bottom of that reaction that we have when someone would say that they were praying like that, and we're like, no. At the bottom of that are lies that we believe about God.
Right.
Lead us to that idolatry. Right. So it's like it's almost like the light is coming into those dark places, and it's hurting our eyes because we're so used to that area being shrouded in darkness.
Right.
And so that's already there. God already knows that that's there, and he wants to bring it to the surface. It's not like it's a new doubt about God, a new lie that we're believing. It's his sweetness that's revealing that through his light and bringing it to the surface so that he can be rid of it, so that we can walk more closely with him.
So true. Okay, so now I want to ask you about your passion for motherhood. You have a passion for motherhood. I have a passion. I didn't even know I had a passion for motherhood. And then I started writing. And then, oh my goodness, I'm like, I have this supreme passion for motherhood. I want to bless moms. I want to pour into moms' hearts. I want to see moms freed up of what burdens us and what keeps us trapped. Because I believe Jesus died he says this, he died, it's for freedom that he set us free. And I want us to walk in that freedom as moms in our motherhood, because I know that when we're freed up, we pass on blessings into our children's lives that are unspeakable. So I want to ask you about, what is your passion for motherhood?
Okay. I have several, but one of the big ones is that for so long as a mom, I parented with this idea that I had a contract almost with the Lord, this if-then parenting. If I do this, God, if I do check all of the boxes and do all the right things so I can be a good mom, then you're going to do this. And it was based on fear. Mm-hmm. And I was afraid, and I talk to a lot of young moms, and I can almost feel the fear coming off them when I say this to them. I was afraid to just rest in the idea that I was powerless.
Yeah.
Over my children's walk with the Lord, and that they had to have their own walk. And that is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to sit in it. And it's certainly uncomfortable to think that there's nothing we can do and we're just going to rest there. And the truth of the matter is that we don't really want our children to just lead good moral lives.
No, we don't.
I think we do. But really, we want them to have a love above all else for God. And we want them to know him even more than we know him. We want them to know all of the goodness we know, but even more. Yeah. And for that to happen, it's not going to always be an even keel, walk in the park kind of day where they walk the Lord. Some people, it looks that way, but I'm convinced we're just not seeing everything that's going on inside. Because we know that the walk our walk with the Lord, and we've walked long enough to know this from experience and watching other people now, that if we trade just looking good and morality, and there's nothing wrong with morality, it's of the Lord, but I'm saying just trying to look like that's the end all. Everything looks good on the outside. We're following all the rules. What we have is Pharisaical.
Yeah, we're whitewashed tombs. Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we don't really want that for our children. And I wish I had learned that a long time ago. So my passion is to help other younger moms to understand that. And I really think that is truth and grace in parenting, right? It's the grace. It's all the grace of the Lord. And the truth is, we really don't have control where we'd like to have control, and we don't want to admit that we want control. And
the joy is when we know that, when we really come to trust God, it's a trust issue, because when we trust God in this journey and we trust him with our kids, we trust that he loves them more. We have to come to that place where it's not just words that we say, oh, they're Jesus, they belong to Jesus and they're not really mine. We can say all that, but when we really mean it with our heart, that we know that he is their good shepherd, he's their good shepherd, that he's a good shepherd and that he's their shepherd. And then that means that he's going to go leave the 99 for the one, that he is, he's after their heart in a way we can't even fathom. And that he's their creator, that Psalm 139, where he formed them in our womb, carefully knit them together. That's his investment in them, that he's way more invested in them than we could ever be in our sinful nature, and he tells us that, like, if you would give your child this, do you think I'm going to give them this? He's so much more invested. And when we really trust that with our life, like it's the place we live, it's the ground we stand on, then we're able to release them in a new way and say, you know what, Lord, if you're allowing them to go down this path and you're allowing them this choice and you care that much more than me, then I'm going to go along with you in this. And I'm going to let you lead, and I'm going to depend on you, and I'm going to entrust them to you. And then he has a lot of room, and we're not so anxious, because anxiety in motherhood is just, it's poison is what it is. Yeah. It's poison. Yeah. So.
And you know what? The other thing too, Patty, is just like when you were talking about, I love that he knit them together in our womb. It was our womb. He knit my son together in my womb. And I want the other passion I have is I want to instill in young moms that they have everything they need. He has given them everything they need.
Right.
We have this sense of being ill-equipped, or we look back at the mistakes our parents made and we're so afraid we don't want to make those same mistakes. And we follow, and I whatever the trendy method of parenting is that we're following. We listen to people who are like, I'll do all those things, rather than trusting that he's given us what we need to parent the children that he's given us.
The child that we knit together in our womb.
Yeah.
The child. Yeah. Right. Yes. Not that child over there, because that child may have a different set of character traits or needs or environment. And so, it works with them, but it's not necessarily going to work with your child. There's not a one-size-fits-all parenting. There are good principles, but there's not a one-size-fits-all. And I remember early in my first year of parenthood, if I'm with this mom, I'm acting like this. And if I'm with this mom, this is my gentle friend, so I'm a gentle mom. And this is my authoritarian friend, so I'm authoritarian. My poor kid was like on like what is really going on, because I'm not parenting him according to what God's given me. I'm parenting him trying to fit into all these different molds that aren't really about him, and about God.
And it's funny, because I had to learn that early in my marriage about marriage. Like, my marriage is not going to look like someone else's marriage. We are two different people. And just getting comfortable in our relationship and not comparing it to other people's. And I feel like we have to learn it all over again in parenting. We have to learn it in our marriage, probably in other relationships too, but that's really where I identify it. Mm-hmm. When we were first married, it was really hard for me. It was a fire. And I finally got to a place where I accepted that it's good. It's a good fire. Marriage is a fire that's good because it refines. And then I have to learn it again in my parenting.
Yes. That God uses it. And I really believe now, like, I've been thinking about this a lot more. How much do I believe this? But that maybe the purpose of parenthood, not the only purpose. I think God has multiple purposes in everything he does. But for me, it's been good to look at parenting is for my refinement. That my kids will become parents, like in the natural order of things, kids will become parents. And that'll be their season of refinement. And that even though I'm here to guide them and shepherd them, it's not like it's a selfish thing where it's about me, but that the biggest thing that's going to come out of my parenting journey isn't so much for my kids as it is going to be that my refinement has come through leading them through learning the lessons God has had for me. And then they'll go off and become parents and they'll learn all these lessons while they're parents, because so much of what you learn growing up isn't what you learn as an adult. You learn certain things by trying out what you've learned. And and there are just certain things we're going to learn through parenthood that we aren't going to learn any other way. And so God has
there's that saying, I can be God or let God. And I've heard that and I totally believed it, but it has never been more deeply rooted in my understanding as it is in parenting, because I would say that I was letting God in all the other areas of my life, but in that one area, it's just like you said, until I actually walked it out, I really didn't get what that meant, be God or let God. With this thing that I was holding so tightly to, I was smothering.
Yes. And what a blessing when we really, and I know it's a constant. I mean, relinquishing is a process. It goes over time, and then our kids get older and their problems become bigger, and it's harder to let go in some ways. We think it's hard when they're little, like they're having a tantrum or something, but then, they become teenagers or adults, and there's just bigger things that we can concern ourselves over. But
bigger tantrums.
Yeah, right. And so, but the relinquishing is such a freedom. It's such a blessing. I wish I could just give every mom that gift of relinquishing, because we're so freed up in ourselves, and now we can have a real relationship with this other person, and we can actually be available to them and available to God, because we're no longer sitting in His throne pretending to run the world. We're actually in our right place, and we can actually, like, I can be with my son in love now in a way I couldn't when I was trying to manage and control everything. It's just a totally different type of experience.
Can I share something with you? I was reading in a book last night. It's really short. Do we have time?
Sure, of course.
Okay, just a couple of sentences. This book is called "The Clouds Ye So Much Dread" by Hannah Reiser. And what you said reminded me of it. She said, our lives are in God's hands, but it's not always easy to live as though we believe it. We distrust the author and try to wrest the pen from his fingers and into our own. It's magically laughable. Picture a preschooler trying to write a novel and using a trunk of a giant redwood for a writing implement. It cannot end well.
That is awesome.
It's the same thing as sitting in his gigantic throne and there's us.
Like, I'm not meant to be here. Yes. He's gracious. He's like, okay, you want to drive this for a while? Let's see how that goes for you. I mean, not in a mean way. Just, he knows we have to write it out, and he knows he's got the answer to that too. So he lets us take it as far as we'll go. And then we say, okay, no, you have to take over. And it's so much better. But he allows us to try that out so that we learn. So what would you say to a new mom? We have some new moms that watch these. So what would you say to a new mom?
The one thing that always sticks out of my mind is to savor it, to really enjoy every moment as if it's the last. I remember a poem that I heard on some Christian radio show when my son was little, about I think it was called The Last. Like, you'll never know when it's the last thing until you look back, and you don't know when it's the last time they're going to call you a certain thing or say something a certain way. Or I remember my son had a school bus, like those little people's school buses, and he used it as a skateboard. Like, when he was like 2 years old, he put his foot in it and use it as a skateboard, and it was so much a part of what he always did. And we didn't think of, like, someday it's going to be the last time he did it. And one day we just saw the school bus and thought, like, we couldn't remember the last time he had done that. And there's so many sweet moments. And with my granddaughter, I am more keenly aware of how quickly it's all going by. Maybe because I now can look back on 22 years that have flown by. And I would say just savor every moment. Enjoy every moment that you can. And the other thing is to invite God into every moment that you can. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately, I think I shared this with you last week, Patty, was there are so many hurting parents around. I just see so many hurting parents. There are so many of us who are hurting, and God has reminded me that He's a hurting parent. And I just think of when Jesus was coming into Jerusalem and He wept. and and said he wanted to pull the men under his wing like chicks, like a hen would pull in her chick. And I think in my early parenting, there were some times when especially when I struggled with not parenting the way I wanted to, when I did things that I didn't want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I would repent and ask God to change it, but I didn't invite him into those moments.
Right.
So when I say savor it and really enjoy every moment and invite God into all of it, I mean like all of it, you know. I just to share the sweetness and the sorrow with him makes it so much richer, and it's transformative.
It is.
All of those times that, if I raised my voice or talked with an unkind tone of voice to my son and then regretted it after, there was so much shame about that. And I would go and repent, but I think if I had just invited the Lord into those moments, and I know that looks different for everyone, but just sit in it and give that to him.
So true. I think because I was talking to a group of moms this morning actually about anger and motherhood. And when you put I called it the pillow of regret, because at night you put your head on the pillow, it's a pillow of regret. It's like you're just laying down in this pool of regret. But if we can invite him into that, we no longer have the shame around it. We know that, and there's a verse, one of my favorite verses, let your gentleness be evident to all, because the Lord is near. The Lord is near, and he is always near. And sometimes we forget how near he is. He's in us, he's with us, he's around us, and we aren't mindful of his presence. And so when we can invite him even into those places, and sin originally, right? They hide, they blame one another. But sin hides and blames. And so we'll do the same thing with our sin today. Like we'll do something in our flesh to our kids. It's regretful. So we have regret, but instead of having godly remorse that leads to repentance, we end up with this deep regret that ends up in guilt, and we wallow in it, and we push the Lord out instead of inviting him in. So I agree with you so much that if we can just invite the Lord into those places when we've made a mistake, when we've sinned, and allow him to be near as he is, our gentleness will come from that knowledge that he's here. He's still loving me. He's still with me. Even though I made a parenting mistake, he hasn't rejected me. There's no condemnation in him. And he's here inviting me to do things differently, teaching me how to do things differently. So that
the other thing, Patty, I think for young moms is so important is not to hide that from each other. Community, right. God, created us for community, and it's really a superpower for all of us. Yeah. And there is strength in numbers, and that saying, sweet things are twice as when a blessing shared is twice as good, and a burden shared is half as heavy. Yeah. The idea that somehow we're the only ones that don't have it all together, I think, can be pervasive, and I think it's transformative for us to start being real with each other. Yes. And have authentic community. And yes. Then we find that nobody has it all together. If you're the person that has it all together, you're going to be really lonely, because nobody has it all together. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You want real friendships and you want real community. It's sharing that part too.
And with safe people, obviously, you don't want to share with somebody who's toxic or who's going to shame you or not handle your tenderness respectfully. But right. When I stood in front of this group of moms and I shared about anger and motherhood, and I shared about the sinful ways we can handle anger from the flesh and the way that God wants to encourage us and invite us into handling it in the spirit. But I think that I said there are taboo things that we don't talk about as moms, with each other. And this was one of them. Anger is one thing that you don't hear moms, like they might say, oh, I wanted to kill my kids today, and everybody laughs. But really, are you talking about your heart and the way it burdens you, that you yell at your children, or that you stonewall your husband when you're angry, or whatever it is? Yeah. Are we really talking through these things with one another in a way that's healing and restorative, so that we can move forward into just a more healing way and let God into it? And we do let God in by community. So I totally agree with that. It's such a good point. So what would you say to a mom who's suffering through some unexpected challenges in her mothering journey? I'm thinking of some moms that I know who are facing kids with chronic illness, kids with disabilities that they didn't expect. to have on the page. When we're pregnant, we're not thinking, oh, my kid's going to have ADD, or my kid's going to be one of the most strong-willed people I've ever encountered, whatever. We don't always foresee the challenges in motherhood. We usually are like, oh, it's going to be so awesome. And I remember we had a foster daughter, and she was such a character, but she was definitely not a girly girl. Like, my idea was I got this really frilly bedroom set. She was 4 weeks.
I remember that.
We were just going to have tea parties. We were going to have tea parties and just girly together. And I was, cause I wasn't I wasn't really super allowed to be super girly growing up. And I've kind of grown into that, and so I thought, oh, this could be awesome. We're going to have this girly bonding. She's more of a performer, and she liked to dress up real wild, and she's just different. She was herself, and she's a beautiful self. But I had this preconceived notion that, this is how she's going to be. So moms who are struggling, even in light ways like that, or more serious ways where their child is prodigal or is challenged with illness, what would you say to that mom that's struggling today through unexpected challenges?
I mean, I think I've said it over and over already during this time, but the first and most important thing is that you're not alone, because I think that all of those examples that you talked about can be isolating. Mm-hmm. You can feel like you're the only one going through it. And sometimes just the circumstances necessitate you pulling back from some things that aren't priority. But I think it's also important to know, just because you're in a tough season doesn't mean that you do have to pull back from everything. Because an important part of self-care is making sure that you're still in community, that you're still doing what you need to do so that you can get through it. And it's not just that you're not alone, but don't allow yourself to be alone.
You don't have to be alone.
Yeah.
Right. You're not alone.
Allow yourself. Yeah, absolutely. And so, we've said this already, God is near to the brokenhearted. Mm-hmm. And this is no surprise to him, whatever the season is. I have to tell myself that. I know, I think I said it a couple times already since we've been talking about it. I have to tell myself that several times a week. This is no surprise to God. God already knew this was going to happen.
He's here already.
He's not feeling overwhelmed by this. He's not. One of the cool things when I realized that God is never disappointed in me, I'm like, God is never disappointed. Nothing is a surprise to him. So there's no disappointment.
Right.
And that's such a relief. Just to rest in that and let that truth kind of, sweep over us, that this is not a surprise to him. He is not disappointed. He's not caught off guard. He's in our corner, and he already knew this was going to happen before it happened. Mm-hmm. With that, he's not going to leave us, and he's going to give us everything that we need for good works in him.
And he has a plan. I love that he has a plan, and his plan is a good plan, and and it's the deepest good. So because it's the deepest good, it doesn't always show itself where we're looking, because it takes time. Deep plans take time. And we're not used to that in our culture, because we're used to driving through and getting our Starbucks or whatever immediately. If we have to wait 10 seconds in the drive-thru, we're a little annoyed. But God's plans are the deeper plans, and they take time to work through. And so we learn patience in motherhood. We learn how to wait for him, wait on him. And that's a blessing. It says in his word, blessed is the one who waits on him. And so when we wait on him, we're blessed, and we receive blessings in the waiting period. But it's not something we have to grow into, but it's so good, because what we wait for is worth the wait. He's worth the wait, And
you know what? If you think about parenting, like small children, toddlers, mm-hmm. that's the one area where we don't try and rush things. Well, sometimes we do. Like, they're ready for potty training or whatever when they're not really. But generally, we're not freaked out that they can't speak before they can speak, because we know that it's a process, and they're communicating as best they can, but it's going to get better. If we were to stop, right at the beginning of when they start communicating, which was a lot of crying or whatever, then, that would be a terrible substitute for when they're able to communicate. And the first time your child says, I love you, and all the things that come in the process, that the only thing you can do is wait. It's just part of development. And that's how it is in our relationship with God and our growth with him too. It's just development.
Yeah. He is continually at work. We just know his hand is there. So I just want to thank you. Is there anything else you want to add before we say goodbye to everybody?
Yeah, I want to tell everyone, if you don't already have Patty's book. She mentioned the parenting your teens in chaos and crisis. Did I misquote it? Crisis?
Through chaos and crisis,
chaos and crisis. Did I say it backwards?
No, it's good.
Okay. If you don't have that book, you need to get it. If you don't have a teen yet and you're a parent, you'll have a teen at some point. So you should get it now. And you should also give it to everyone who has a child that's about to be a teen. And then Slow Down Mama. If you don't have Slow Down Mama, you should get it and read it, and you should share it. And the devotional, which I think is perfect for Mother's Day and perfect for Easter, is also something that you should get. So I know Patty's not going to say that because she won't talk about it herself, but I'm going to talk about it for her. And I just want to tell you that everything that is in that book is not theory. Patty has lived it. I've watched her live it. I've had the privilege of walking alongside her in her life journey as she's lived a lot of it. And something we haven't talked about enough, but it's ending, so I have to keep it short, is rest. And we talked about resting in the Lord, and we talked about self-care just a little bit. We touched on them, but it's so important, especially when parenting doesn't go our way.
Yes, especially. Yeah. I have a good friend, Kathy, who always tells me, how's your self-care? And sometimes I'm like, I don't even know what that looks like, and so it's so good to have friends who will hold your feet to the fire about that not to overindulge ourselves or to be selfish, but to take care of ourselves so that we're present and we're able to be the best people, the best moms we want to be, the best wives, the best friends.
And that's just evidence of the goodness of God that we have friends that say things like that.
Isn't that awesome? No. Yes. Thank you so much, Jess, for joining today. I'm so grateful that you were here. It's just
I'm so grateful that you asked me. I love you.
I love you. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.